Good news for Australia's oceans. The Great Barrier Reef is showing signs of repair. The reef has been suffering from a large amount of ocean bleaching due to the rise in ocean temperatures. However, a group monitoring the reef have found that 2/3 of it have the highest growth of coral in nearly 4 decades. Dr. John Bruno, a marine ecologist and professor for the University of North Carolina, is with us now. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. You know, the reef's still vulnerable to climate change, but what does this growth in coral really mean for scientists?
Well, it's nice to see. It's not unexpected. It's really just a result of so much mortality over the last 5 years. The Great Barrier Reef and reefs around the world have experienced heat waves where the water temperatures are a degree Celsius or so warmer than usual, and that causes bleaching and eventual coral mortality. So there's been a lot of more death. And so these are essentially baby corals replenishing the population, and they're growing back. And that's nice to see. But we essentially always see that after climate-related and even natural disturbances. The bigger problem is that the causes of mortality, these heat waves killing the adults, that are becoming much more frequent and much more intense. When I was a kid, they happened every 15 or 20 years, and now they're happening almost every single year.
So heat waves, much like on land, also in the ocean. Do we know what caused the growth in the Great Barrier Reef for sure?
Yeah, it's just a natural process. So corals are animals, and they create babies. We call them larvae, and these babies attach to the reef where their parents essentially died off last year and the year before, and they're growing out, spreading across the surface of the reef. So that's wonderful to see that recovery. Unfortunately, it's almost all species that are really sensitive to especially high temperatures, species in the genus Acropora. So these plating corals, they really dominate the Great Barrier Reef. So they're super weedy. They recover really quickly after coral die-offs, but they're also the most sensitive species out there to climate change.
Well, the reef has experienced 4 ocean bleachings in the past: 2016, 2017, 2020, again in 2022. So with the growth in coral, do you feel as if the reef could face a newer threat?
Yeah, it's still facing the same threat. And like I was saying, it's getting worse, essentially getting worse every year. So I think there's almost no question these corals and these reefs will experience a heat wave and another bleaching and mortality event in the next 18 to 24 months.
So the corals are certainly important, but what can people do to protect the oceans now and more importantly into the future?
You know, the biggest thing we can do is vote and implement policies that will reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. And it's wonderful that both Australia and the U.S. are on the cusp of implementing the biggest climate change plans, strategies that both countries have ever done. So that's really good news. And that's really the main thing we can do as citizens. I mean, of course, we can reduce our own emissions, riding our bikes, driving cars that are plug-in hybrids, that kind of thing. But yeah, voting and implementing these big policies that encourage the development of renewable energy is really the biggest thing we can do.
All right. Dr. John Bruno, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.